Hey guys, Doug. So today we're going to be talking about how to manipulate a pistol slide if you're uncomfortable with doing so or if you don't think you can, which I assure you, you almost definitely can. So with that being said, this video is being made for people that are extremely new to firearms, and with that in mind, I have to talk about safety before we get into how to do this. Okay? Guys, a quick note, before we get into firearm safety, I want to talk about the condition of the firearm. If you cannot rack the slide comfortably, there's a good chance you can't confirm the condition of the chamber either. We're going to ignore that for now, being mindful that we can't guarantee the condition of the firearm, but we are going to remove any magazines from the firearm and set them aside, because the magazine is what continually feeds the chamber with ammunition. And if we're sitting here and racking the slide, there's a potential that you rack a fresh round into the chamber having just watched a round eject out of the gun. And that can create a very unsafe circumstance. So let's make sure our magazine is removed. You do that by depressing the magazine release, retracting the magazine, and then physically separating it away from the firearm. Okay, guys? Just want to make sure we're staying safe. So, two things I want to be super aware of when we're doing this. I want to make sure we don't interact with the trigger. I don't want our body, I don't want our clothing, our environment, nothing to interact with the trigger at all while we're manipulating the slide. Secondly, we need the firearm to stay in a safe direction the entire time we handle the firearm, okay? So what does a safe direction mean? That means that in the case the firearm was to go off, that the bullet would go into a place of the least possible consequence. So as an example, I'm in a cabin right now, there's no basement. It would be extremely unlikely for anyone or anything to be under my subfloor. If I were to point this weapon down and pull the trigger and the firearm was to discharge, the bullet would go down through my flooring, through the subfloor, maybe through a joist, and then down into the dirt and gravel, harming nothing, right? That would be the safest possible direction right now, okay? Now, the place I am actually pointing the firearm is a safe direction, but just as an example, real world, that is what I mean by a safe direction, okay? With that in mind, the first part of success of manipulation of a firearm slide is to hold the firearm securely and in a safe direction with finger off the trigger, of course. All right. What that means is you want to be as high up on the pistol grip as you reasonably can be and hold it firm. Now, when I say firm, I don't mean squeeze it as hard as you can, but I certainly don't mean hold it loosey-goosey so you can't actually exert pressure on the slide, right? A firm, respectful handshake is probably about right for pressure. If you don't have a very good handshake, hold it like twice as hard as whatever you think that is. What you're looking for is that the firearm feels securely mounted in your hand, that you couldn't foresee the firearm and your hand moving as separate components. Next, you're going to want to lock your wrist. What do I mean by lock your wrist? Fair question. All right. So I don't have a milk jug, but the way I like to describe this is if you were to hold a milk jug, you wouldn't like hold a milk jug like this. That would be weird and very uncomfortable. You're going to strengthen your wrist and so that you can pick the milk jug up, right? That tension that you use in your wrist to keep the milk jug secure, that's what I mean. You want to have the wrist secure, right? Flexed, tensioned, locked, however you want to think of that. All right? So take these three fingers, your thumb, wrap them around the pistol grip, high and tight, all the way up under the trigger guard, the web of your hand all the way up into this back section of the pistol grip, and hold the weapon firm with a tight wrist, all right? That's the first step to success. Now I'm gonna go over two different methods for physically racking the slide, but to grasp the slide, I'm gonna also go with two methods in two locations. One is we're simply going to grasp our hand around the slide on a point of the slide that has texturing to assist you in grasping the slide. Now this may be at the rear of your pistol, it may be at the front, it may be at both, like in this example, all right? You're going to then squeeze this slide into your palm so that you can get a secure grasp on the slide. And then you're going to start putting pressure on the slide to pull it to the rear, increasing the pressure until the slide moves back and hits a mechanical stop, all right? The other way is to take your hand like this and pinch the slide like this, and then same thing, you can do this at the front as well if you have traction aid there. Now, if that is not successful for you, do not worry. We're going to have a way to manage that, all right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to incorporate our entire body, our upper body, into this movement by taking that firearm in the same way that we just tried, and we're going to move our support hand, our weak hand, back, and our strong hand forward, all right? So this hand's going to move back, this hand's going to move forward, and we're going to do that at the same time, all right? Like that. And then you will be able to use your shoulders and your chest to work that slide. Now, at that point, you should be able to rack the slide with relative ease, but maybe not as easy as you had anticipated. All we're trying to do here is to get those first couple of manipulations, okay, to make sure that we have success. And once you feel it, most people, once they feel it once, they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. And they can do it relatively easily. Not fluently, but easily, right? Once you get to the point that you can manipulate a slide, we need to go about locking the slide to the rear. So before we go into how to do this, let me show you what components are at play in this action. It'll help you understand what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so we have our pistol here, and I want to show you a couple of points on this pistol that are relevant to this conversation, okay? First, here we have a cutout in the slide, all right? See that little notch? And here we have a device that is called your slide lock or slide release, all right? Now what you need to do is pull the slide until this cutout has traveled beyond this device, and then slip this device up in front of that catch, all right? So what you're trying to accomplish is pulling that notch back, pushing this up, and lowering the slide onto the catch. That's it. That's the whole thing, all right? Now, the way that we're going to accomplish this is by simply pressing up on that component and then repeating the same thing you did earlier, all right? Now, in this case, I'm holding the firearm slightly differently, just to kind of be able to demonstrate this. I'm working around a camera, but the same way that you were holding the firearm is adequate. Just keep that same orientation, the weapon pointed in a safe direction, pull the thumb up, and then retract the slide to the rear, all right? And that will retain, assuming you do it correctly, the slide to the rear, which will allow you to then inspect the firearm to make sure the chamber is indeed empty, the breech area is empty, and you have no ammunition down in the magazine well as well, all right? That is all that is going on here. Very simple stuff. Now, if you happen to be left-handed and your gun does not agree with you on what is correct as far as left-handedness, on this firearm, we have one on the left side as well, so we can simply do the same thing. But some firearms do not have that, so if you're left-handed, you can use this finger and simply swipe up on the slide catch and then do the same thing, and that should retain the slide to the rear just the same. Just be mindful that you're not using your trigger finger to manipulate firearm controls, and you need to be very careful. The same thing can be done for your magazine release, but you see you're coming down past the trigger and using it to manipulate that magazine release. You need to be careful doing that kind of stuff, okay? Not saying don't do it, I'm just saying be very mindful of what's at risk if you do it wrong, right? Okay, so that's all that's really involved. Now, as far as releasing the slide, there's a couple ways we can do this, okay? One is you can simply retract the slide, and this will, under spring pressure, fall out of the way. See that? And that will allow you to release the slide forward. The other method is to simply press down on the slide release, all right? And you simply, opposite direction, push down, and the slide should snap forward, all right? Now, a note I want to mention is that if you have an unloaded magazine in your firearm when you go to release the slide, it's going to be much more difficult to release this component. It's considerably harder. Now, the reason for that is because when you have a unloaded magazine in the firearm, it's going to interact with an internal component on that same piece. So watch, you can see this is lifted. If I retract my magazine, it drops. If I insert my magazine, it lifts. And that's happening here at the front left portion of the magazine, there's a cutout on the magazine follower that interacts with that slide stop, okay? And that's what allows the last shot hold open feature to work. So you're now overcoming the friction from the slide pressing forward and the spring tension in the magazine at the same time, okay? So it's going to make it much more difficult. On that note, if you have difficulty with locking a slide to the rear and you need to do it, if you have an unloaded magazine and you need to verify it's unloaded, you need to be able to observe and identify the follower of the magazine and observe the entirety of it, that there's no ammunition on the follower. The follower is this piece right here. In this case, it's orange. They can be black, yellow, green, blue. They can be all kinds of different colors, but you need to identify the component and that the magazine is completely clear of ammunition. But if your handgun has a last shot hold open, and again, you can just Google whatever the numbers or words on the firearm say, you can Google, does a, in this case, Glock 47 Austria 9x19, you don't need to know what the numbers mean, just type the words and numbers into the search engine, say, does the Glock 47 Austria 9x19, in this case, have a last round hold open? If Google says it does, it probably does. So this is something you can do, all right? Again, be absolutely certain the magazine is clear of ammunition, but when you insert that empty magazine, you can observe it will exert pressure up on the slide stop, and then you can simply retract the slide to the rear, and it will automatically retain it for you, it being the slide to the rear. Okay, awesome stuff. Then retract the magazine, and you can go about inspecting that your firearm is clear of ammunition and do whatever administrative task you need to do from that point forward. All right? So hopefully this is helpful in showing you how to go through learning this fundamental firearm mechanic. All right? Now, I want to talk for a moment on how it might have come to be that you built the self-doubt in whether or not you could do this function. All right? When you see someone that has used firearms for a long time do these actions, they look very simple. They look like they're very easy. But it turns out the amount of force it takes is a little bit more than you anticipated, and that's all it is, all right? I want to remind you, you're looking at this 11 years into me owning and carrying these firearms daily, all right? You're not looking at this day one where I was 21 years old, had just bought my first firearm, and I'm sitting there trying to get my slide locked to the rear for the first time, all right? So have patience with yourself. And I want to mention, you found a moment where you were not comfortable with something and you said, you know what? I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's great stuff. All right. So you went through enough YouTube to find this channel and got the information you needed. That's a huge win. Okay. It's a small thing, but a huge win, at least in my book. I hope that this gives you some self-assuredness in starting to build competency with these tools, all right? It is my opinion that far too many people use these tools casually, carelessly, without enough respect for what they actually are. And you are showing all the signs at this point to have demonstrated that you want to build competency, and that's great stuff. Keep looking for good information. We're gonna do our best to provide it here and within our company that my wife and I are building. But I just want to offer some self-assuredness. Thank you so much for your time and every moment of attention you've given this video with the trust that we can help you get to this end. And I hope that we have. Otherwise, I love you guys. Shalom.